England to Poland, every step across the ocean, the ruling classes them is in a mess. Oh yes, the capitalist system a regress, but the Soviet system now progress. So which one of them you think is best? When are the two of them the workers?
Welcome to our weekly labor show, Workers' World, right here on CTV. Over the past few years, refugees and migrants have been in the spotlight all over the world. Since the end of apartheid, millions of migrants and refugees have settled in South Africa, most coming from African and Asian countries. Those who are poor have encountered many problems here, including bad treatment and corruption by state officials, xenophobic attacks in townships, and discrimination in social life. At the same time, our government has promoted an African renaissance and lately under Cyril Ramaphosa, closer political unity similar to the European Union. What will this mean for us? Should we still have national borders? With us in the studio to discuss this very important topic of the evening, we have Beru Wuganaale.
Thank you for having me.
And you're the project coordinator, Nigerian Transformation Movement, right?
Yes, exactly.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
On your screen is Tendai Bhiza. And Tendai is the executive administrator of PASO.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
And right now you're looking at Germain Kalombo, who's the executive director of Voice of Africans for Change. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you guys.
Thank you.
But before we move on to the discussions of this evening, we'll watch this short clip prepared for us by the Workers' World Media Productions team.
The asylum document is not a work permit per se, but it comes with a condition to work. Asylum permits are also permits that people apply individually when they enter the country. And those permits will always give them a condition to work or to study. The same with the LSP, it comes with a condition to work or to study, or even to conduct a business. The same with the ZP, it comes with a condition to work or to study or to conduct a business. So the corporate permit, that is solely the responsibility of the employer to apply for that permit. That will come through the Department of Labor, as they explained, and then the adjudication and final decision will be with the Department of Home Affairs. Those are the permits that are directly applied by the employer himself. So I just wanted to have that clarity in the House so that we know what type of things we are talking about.
Dit is altyd lekker om by die boere in te gaan, want hulle misbruik ons mense, punt nommer 1. Daar is Zimbabweërs wat hulle misbruik het, vir hoeveel jaar het hulle die mense misbruik. En nou nog steeds. Maar wat sien hulle? Hulle sien nie die probleem raak nie, maar hulle sien net die goedkoop arbeid. Dis wat hulle raak sien.
Ons moet ons eie kragte staan van vandag af. Ons word leebeloftes aan mekaar. So kyk verby Zimbabwe, kyk verby Lesotho, kyk verby daai. Ons is mense, ons is vroumense, ons lê honger, ons kry swaar en ons moet self staan en van nou af ons self beklei is. Dankie.
Elke dag kom die lorries hier in, hulle kom vat die Zimbabwe's, maar hulle vat die van ons. Die Lesotho's kry werk, die Zimbabwe's kry werk, ons van Suid-Afrika kry nie werk nie. Die boere jaag die mense weg op die plase, deur die Zimbabwe's. Zimbabwe's sit elke dag op die plaas, die boere vat het vir 105. Ons wil nie die 105 hê nie.
No, it's not the Zimbabweans, it's the farm owners. They are the biggest problem here in the Dorings, not the workers.
because they want to divide us, and they only give the Zimbabweans work so that the division will come in there. They give the Zimbabweans the work, and we as farmers, as workers also must say, no, it's only the Zimbabweans. Let's begin with the Zimbabweans.
The organization also works with migrants and foreign workers because there's this competition that's been created between the two groups, and farmers has been at the forefront of creating this, and also the fact that there's constant fight and competition between the workers for work. And the reason why that is because farmers know that they can exploit Zimbabwean workers, they can exploit the Lesotho workers as well. Most of the South African workers, some of them do know what the law says, they know where to go, but many of these workers, because they in their countries there's conflict situations, they're willing to work for whatever they can get. We know the situation that is there in Zimbabwe, we can't overlook it. So they're willing to work for less. What we try to create is to form a connection between the South African workers and the migrant and foreign workers, so that we can root out the problem, which is the farmers, because they are creating this problem.
Hello, my name is Tendai and I'm your host for this evening. So as we start our conversation, I would like to start with you, Germain. If you could give us an overview of the refugees and migrants in South Africa. I mean, how many are there and where are they from? Which countries do they originate from?
Thank you, Ayanda. Actually, it's quite difficult to give a proper number. When you go into internet and you go in different structure, numbers are given differently and based on information they do have. When you check, Africa Check lately has published that about 2 to 3 million refugees have moved to South Africa for the last 3 years. But neither South African statistic, Home Affairs and other structure, even the UNHCR itself, cannot give us numbers. Why? It's because Home Affairs is felt in his job at that point, because since we got a large number of undocumented people that cannot be numbered, and you got those who were first documented and now they're undocumented due to Home Affairs system, it's becoming so difficult to come up with a number. So me giving you a number, I'll be just lying. It's quite difficult to give the number.
Is it really that difficult to give us a number? Do you agree, Tendai?
Yes, I do agree with that, because some people they came in and some they've since left and some they've also passed away, and also there are some people who are undocumented. So it is really difficult and to trace how many refugees and immigrants in South Africa.
But why do refugees and immigrants even come to South Africa? What are the problems that they face in their countries? Perhaps that's where we should start this conversation, to understand why they are here.
Look, the problems or reasons are quite different from a person to another. All refugees in South Africa didn't come based on the same reason. Some are here for political reason, some are here because the war situation in their respective countries have moved them, forced them to move out of the country. Some who cannot shy away from that are here for social reason, economical reason, I might say. So reasons are quite different depending on one person to another.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with my co-panelists, or I can agree with them more. It's safe to say that right now, South Africa has a very peculiar position on the continent. If you look at the issue of pull and push factor in migration, things like infrastructure, perception of possibilities of opportunities, and the fact that there's a global dimension to this as well. The fact that other nations of the world are increasingly closing their own doors to accepting refugees and asylum seekers. And the proximity of South Africa to their neighboring African countries. For example, if I'm escaping violence in Congo, it's easier for me to make my way on a truck into South Africa than taking the risk of crossing either the Sahara or the Atlantic to go to Europe. So this is a reality for somebody that is looking for safety and for somebody that is looking for opportunity.
You know, since 2008, we've been seeing a lot of these xenophobic attacks against Africans, against Asian immigrants and refugees. What have you analyzed the cause of this to be, perhaps?
What I've analyzed is that we are told we are stealing jobs for the locals. That is number one. And number two, like people from Zimbabwe, they are also told they are coming to seek medical attention in South Africa, because also the medical in Zimbabwe is not proper, or there is no drugs in Zimbabwe. Like right now as we are talking, there is no drugs, and also there is an outbreak of cholera. So some people, they might opt to come to South Africa. And also some of the people, they also have relatives this side, and some they have relatives that side. So you know, you cannot also divide people who have relatives in South Africa, and so it differs with people and with somebody's perspective. Or
yes, Germain, please.
I want to come back to your question when you ask why this. Look, I believe when you look around, you kind of understanding that the political influences played a major role in the outbreak of xenophobia. We do have political leaders who have been using refugees and asylum seekers as their boxing bags, either for their political agenda or some other thing, because recently you had Becky Cele saying clearly that refugees were criminals. You had the Minister of Health saying that refugees are overcrowding hospitals. These are just cheap statements coming from political leaders that can easily influence people on the ground. And my belief is that less has been done by the government to making sure that South Africans are informed why these people are in the country. The state now is spending money via NGOs to run workshops, to run discussion. This might be late in my view, but I believe that at first, what the government is supposed to say was to go out and say, these people are coming for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons, so that we know why they're here. Because I'm doing my job in Danuna, doing my job in Mizamo Yetu, where VAC is mostly implemented. These are questions that we're coming across, where people cannot even give the difference between a refugee and just a foreign national.
Yeah.
You see, for them, a Chinese cannot be a refugee. We got so many Chinese who are refugees. A Pakistani cannot be a refugee because of the skin of the color. So I believe that there were a lack of information on the ground that the government's supposed to do. Yeah.
No, I get you, Germain. What you're saying, we're talking about the education and the political commitment. And it's quite interesting that you mentioned those things. And of course, you touch on a critical issue of lighter skinned people not seen as refugees nor immigrants. We'll come back to that. But hey, we've got to pay the bills, guys. So at home, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned as we go on this short break.
Before we continue with this broadcast, here's what you can expect in this week's bulletin. NUMSA wins the right to strike battle against plastics employers. Heineken workers call for a boycott. Organized labor in Nigeria plans a nationwide strike. And equal pay strikes in Glasgow, Scotland. All this and more later in tonight's show.
And there you have it. So we come back to discussions. Well, before we went on the commercial break, we were talking about political commitment that is not there. We talk about politicians that throw statements carelessly which exacerbate xenophobia. We are actually concerned about that. And of course, the biggest concern one would say is the education aspect, is that our government is really doing not much. Are they even doing anything to educate the nationals about the causes why we have immigrants and refugees in our country today? So those are the things that we spoke about. But I think, Tendai, you touched on a very critical point that left me thinking a little bit during the break, and that was you saying that the locals believe that foreign nationals, refugees, are here to steal their jobs, right? Is this a fair statement to make? Is it correct, by the way?
To me, I don't see it as correct. Because if I'm to take about my situation, when I came in South Africa, I was not working, but I was forced to work because where I was earning a living in the market, I was doing my own things. I was a trader, so I was forced because of that's when also we were pushed out of Greenpoint Stadium, so I had to look for work. Up to now, that's where I'm still working. So it means also that I was pushed to look for work whereas I never intended to work. I intended to do my things, to do business for my own. And
to be self-employed.
Yes.
I would like to add to what Tendai just said.
Yes.
The question here is to ask, one will ask, how many refugees and asylum seekers are working in South Africa? No one can bring statistics about it. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I've never seen a qualified doctor being turned away by any institution in order to employ a foreign national. I've never seen a qualified carpenter being turned away. At some point you ask yourself a question, which kind of jobs are we talking about? When you go even lower on the security jobs, when we came in this country, I believe that about 80% of refugee male were security guard. But this has changed tremendously during the years. Why? Because you got things like the City of Cape Town telling companies that whatever company that employ foreign national won't get tender. And many have left, or they were forced to leave and find something else. So I believe that the issue of competition when it comes to work, to me, doesn't stand. There's this, it's very, doesn't fit, should I say.
I would like to quickly add that, again, it goes back to something on our own indigenous government that took over from 1994. Perhaps the bigger question to ask is, at the fall of apartheid, what was paramount on the mind of the ANC? Was it to capacitate its citizens so that there could be gaps, build more skills and professionals among the disadvantaged community? I don't like to use previously disadvantaged because they are still disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Or was it to incapacitate them through welfarist packages? I tell myself each time and say, I have had numbers bantered. We've built 2.5 million, 4-point-something million houses. What would have happened if we have helped, if we have provided basic compulsory university education for 5 million of the disadvantaged community, that they move up to the middle class and they become entrepreneurs, job creators, modern? for me, it's an indictment on the most infrastructurally developed African country that I crossed the border against my dignity, against my will, struggling for crumbs, and my brother, who this is his home, is struggling for the same crumb with me. So like he said, what kind of jobs are we talking about? Is that the kind of job that a citizen should be taking? So again, it goes back to the issues of what has this government done. But the big point is that they keep allowing a system that perpetuates the near incapacitation of its citizens. We need to be fair. It's agreed that when somebody crosses the border, you want to definitely survive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we should say to ourselves that the government, they want a cheap way out to think that those who cross the border is a problem. But the big problem is that they have not created enabling condition for their citizens.
And before the break, we spoke about the race issue.
Yes.
This is a major point. For an average South African, a white person cannot be a refugee in South Africa. A Chinese cannot be a refugee. To some extent, the Pakistani and so forth. If we really need to check now if all white that we have in this country from outside, if they do have their passport with visa in order, surely at the airport tonight you'll have more than 3,000 being deported.
Very interesting you raised that.
So again, you come with this issue of jobs. These are people who are coming because of their color. They are given tenders. They get millions. Whereby I'm getting 3,000, I've been seen by my South African friend as if I'm taking his job. But are we really gonna fight for 3,000? There's someone who came outside with the same condition as me, but is getting a tender for 70 million, and no one is there to speak about. So, should I believe that?
I'm gonna catch up on that, but after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for staying with us. And before we went on the commercial break, we were discussing the rules of government. And it's very interesting, Barry, that you mentioned that what government needed to do is to actually make sure that its people get formal education post-apartheid, so that we don't find the local people scrambling for the same crumbs that the foreign nationals are scrambling for. Of course, accepting the fact that the reasons for coming to the country, some of the foreign nationals did not come here out of pleasure. It was because of situation, political, economic, and social situations back home. And one key thing that I want us to really entertain right now is the issue of the race, or rather continue from taking over the jobs. You mentioned issue of race, which I'll come back later to, Germain. But talking about taking over jobs, Tendai, here's what I want to pose to you in particular, because you responded to that first. Okay. And of course, everyone is welcome to debate. We've seen in the insert that we've watched the case in Durance, where the farmer prefers foreign nationals to locals. And that is what got people upset. And that is what led to protest and exacerbated xenophobia. What is your take on that? Tendai, I'll let you go first, and of course everyone else can jump in.
Oh, okay. Regarding to that, you know, in April, we also went to a farm, which is in Robertson, and we had gone there to hear what the farmer has to say about it. There was almost a similar incident like what happened in Durance, and we were told, okay, you know, with the locals, they like packaging, and this is where they like. They don't want to go into the field and pick up some tomatoes or some grapes or whatever. And also the other thing is, you know, for you to be working in the farm, in the field exactly, you know, you have to meet by target. So they've also noticed that they cannot meet up the target because of, if you cannot meet up the target, it means also you are also earning less. So with those other people who also get a little bit of money, they are meeting the target and they are getting, that's why they are also getting a little bit of money. But with the farmer, he says, we have to put the locals where they want to. We can't force them to go into the field, and they don't want to work in the field. So that was the other thing which the farmer raised to us. Mm-hmm. But there is also a challenge because there is also exploitation by the farmer because of
Yeah.
So
Barry.
Okay. I keep going back to post-apartheid. I will keep going back to 1994, perhaps because of my own little background and involvement in the struggle. One of the biggest problem that happened in this country immediately after apartheid is that the struggle, the labor movement and political awareness, the civil society structures were sort of demobilized. I say this because the level of education, of understanding the power dynamics between an employer and an employee, capitalism and the working class is missing. Mm-hmm. Because what ought to happen is that labor movements themselves are not helping the matter. I say this because the reason why the worker from Zimbabwe, the worker from DRC seems to be a threat to the fellow worker is that they don't know that they are in the same class because there's nobody that is organizing them around the issues. So the power is in the hand of the farmer in the name of a free democratic society. This is a key and fundamental issue. I don't think the South African worker from the clip we watch is necessarily saying that the worker from across the border should not be employed. But the question is, under what condition are you employing them that seems to disempower us? That is the issue. And that issue can only be addressed by a strong worker movement.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to add on what he said. We are sitting on a very serious issue here. When you go back to farms, because we receive so many reports regarding the fight between workers, but also the attitude of farmers. But I like the comment that one lady has raised there, saying that both parties of workers, saying that foreign nationals and locals should come together to form a union that will make sure that they question the farmers who are bosses on the choice that they're making. Because I believe that from the time that people who are on the ground, they are not united, they are the one creating or giving more ingredient to that kind of war that farmers are putting in place. The other thing, what Tendai was saying, I don't agree with that. You as employer, you don't say that they have no skill to go 1, 2, 3. Remember that the law says that employers have duty to train employees so that they bring them the new technology. I mean, they won't tell us that there is no South African who can go on the field and reach the target. This is a totally false statement. What I'm saying here is, as much as foreign nationals who are documented or not can access work, as much as South Africans. So this narrative of thinking that they cannot go reach the target, that's why we've employed Zimbabwean or Congolese or people from Malawi or Lesotho. I just think that something has to be done. Again, it comes to what my brother was saying. The government is not doing enough.
Yeah. And it goes back, I mean, Tendai also says, I have to say, that, you know, this is what the farmer says the South Africans don't want to do certain work, which I probably don't even agree with, because otherwise why would there be protests? I mean, we protest because, you know, something is taken away from you and something that you're entitled to. But I think the bigger challenge that the employers have is the fact that they want to exploit. They want to undercut the salaries and actually overlook the laws that have been set by our government. And of course, we have a government that does not enforce any of these, you know. So I think I want to move with my brother. But before we continue that, we go on to this short commercial break, and don't go anywhere. Thank you for staying with us. And now we cross over to Studio 1, where Jorina is waiting for us with the news. Jorina?
Thank you, Ayanda. And now for this week's Global Labour News. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa has successfully defended the right to strike in the Johannesburg Labour Court after the Plastics Converters of South Africa applied for an urgent interdict to block the national strike in the plastic sector. However, the court ruled in NUMSA's favour, dismissing the application made by the employers. Last week, thousands of NUMSA members embarked on an indefinite strike in more than 450 plastics companies, demanding better working conditions, increased wages, and the allocation of benefits set by the Engineering Bargaining Forum, which plastic employers are also members of. The union said that the claim that the strike was illegal was an attempt to victimize workers and stop them from striking in support of their demands. NUMSA is also calling on all their regions to mobilize all workers in the plastic sector and will be intensifying the strike. Meanwhile, workers from Heineken are calling for a boycott of the beer over the festive season for a second year in a row, after management refused to meet and to discuss issues around poverty wages, insecure employment, and abusive management. This comes after a group of 60 labour broker workers were denied entry to Heineken's headquarters in Sandton, Johannesburg. The workers decided to go directly to the head office and demand a meeting with Heineken's CEO after the company refused to hear their grievances. According to the Casual Workers Advice Office, Heineken has used up to 6 labour brokers to avoid taking responsibility for the appalling conditions the workers have to endure. Workers have been fighting a 2-year battle to be recognized as permanent employees of Heineken. Now, in Nigeria, trade unions will be embarking on a nationwide strike on the 6th of November over the country's minimum wage. This follows the inability of the federal government and the labor unions in Nigeria to arrive at consensus over the new minimum wage. According to organized labor, the government had in fact agreed on an amount during negotiations, but is now dishonestly retreating from this position. The strike follows a nationwide strike in September that was halted when government agreed to renegotiate. And finally, female council workers in Glasgow, Scotland staged a 48-hour strike action on Monday and Tuesday, bringing many schools and nurseries to a standstill. The action, involving over 8,500 cleaners and care workers, is over a dispute for equal pay. In addition, about 600 refuse staff, street cleaners and road workers refused to cross picket lines in solidarity with the strikers. The strikers working say the local government Glasgow City Council has been too slow to act on thousands of legal claims lodged on equal pay dating back more than a decade. In 2006, the local authority implemented a pay and benefits program aimed to close the pay gap. Last year, Scotland's highest civil court ruled that the 2006 program had discriminated against women workers and that thousands of them had been excluded from bonuses. But 10 months later, union leaders say that the city authority has agreed to nothing, offered nothing, and that the time had come to take action in hopes of putting an end to this long-standing injustice. And that concludes this week's Global Labour News. Till next week, over to you, Ayanda.
And thanks, Jorina. And Tom, thank you for staying with us. We're back to our discussions. Before we left, we were speaking about the challenges that you are experiencing, and of course, we were on the verge of talking and really engaging on the African Renaissance question, and of course, Germain, you are on the floor.
We all need to agree and congratulate Head of State for the work that they've done recently with pushing the AU Agenda 2063. That comes with so many objectives, and one of them is actually the freedom of movement of person that we will be talking about shortly later on. But the most important thing is to see the free trade agreement that has been signed in Kigali recently, last March, where African countries have understood that it's time to come up with a common market that will compete with European market, American market. Why is it so? Because the intra-African business, it's so lower at the point that we get into the employment issue that we're talking about. But if we need now to, this agreement has to be now to be ratified by countries for it to enter in force. But once it enters in force, we're surely going to see a serious growth of the economy in the continent. And this, I believe that the issue of unemployment won't pose much problem. So we believe, and talking about South Africa, President Cyril is showing clearly that his position on the continent is very, very important. And I believe that if South Africa and Nigeria, who are leading the economy of the continent, should work strongly in that sense, we will surely with time reduce a number of issues that the continent is witnessing now.
Oh, yes, well, I do agree with you, Brother Germain. And I also wanted to say, with me, I've heard about the SADC visa, SADC passport, but we are still waiting to hear what is going to happen with those things. I think that would be very good for our African countries and our brothers and sisters, as well as the locals as well.
I want to come back to that point. We'll come back to discuss that. Just as Germain was explaining, one would quickly remember that we have a lot of these South African companies that have moved to a lot of these African countries. We're looking at ShopRite, F&B, we have MTN, we can count quite a number of them. But what has the impact of them moving to the countries been on the local economy?
Okay, thank you. You raised that very sensitive question. I think that is perhaps one of the missing link in the narrative here in South Africa. I think one of the things that could address issues of xenophobia and promote integration is for us to start asking companies that operate in other African countries to say, what is the inflow? What do you get from this country versus what the people here gets out? I think it was in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, that a young man by the name Sean Hatting that worked for ERIG did a research paper called South Africa in Africa. If you can look at that paper, and it states that what the immigrant community in South Africa sends back to their country is 1/4 of what the South African companies get from other African countries. That is one part of it. The second part, which is where again I go back to the weakness of the labor movement, be it I knew there was relationship between COSATU and LSA, but there is a weakness. I'll tell you what one of the weaknesses is. You can investigate this. In Nigeria, for example, we see what happened recently. They were fined because of undermining the laws of Nigeria. Secondly, if you work for MTN in Nigeria, you can investigate this. I don't know whether it has changed now, but up to a few years ago, you were not allowed to be unionized. If you work for Stanbic, you were not allowed to be unionized. At the time, it was found that if you work for ShopRite in Nigeria, what you earn is less than 1,000 rand. Now, the condition of employment and the kind of things they do, these big corporates do, in fact, is something that you cannot imagine. And that's so one of the things I thought about this show when while I saw this question, when you brought this question, is perhaps can't we as civil society movement say, hold these companies accountable to even do their CSI to address the situations of citizens of those countries that are resident in South Africa. I'll give you an example. If MTN is making $1 million, for argument's sake, from Nigeria, what stops MTN devoting 2% of that to assisting to address the maybe Nigerian citizens that are on the streets?
I wanted to hold that thought. That's a very critical issue. But unfortunately, we've got to pay the bills again.
Thank you.
At home, please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us, and this is the last segment of our show. Before we went on the commercial break, Barry, we were talking about the South African countries that are South African companies operating in other African countries.
Yes.
And yes.
Yeah, what I was saying is that if you match rand for rand, more is being brought back home. At least that would help if that is put in the narrative. That is one. Secondly, we can also ask these South African companies to say, you're making so much from these countries. For example, from Congo, from Nigeria, from Kenya, Telkom is there, everybody is there. How do you contribute to helping the citizens of those countries who are here so that they can, be lifted in terms of their human capital? And South Africa will be the biggest beneficiary for it, because if South Africa does not pick up its responsibility in order to make the best use of the opportunity it has to make the whole of the continent better, somebody will pick that opportunity.
I would like to intervene. At some point, I don't agree with him. We have to look at this. What you say, said, actually, it's addressing weaknesses of our countries. When, for instance, you telling us, which is a truth, that an employee of ShopRite earn about 1,000 rand in Nigeria, it's the same situation in Kinshasa, in the DRC. But you need to ask yourself why. It's because our government have came into the music with those companies on the individual level. We see Nigeria, we see Congo, but actually these are individuals who are earning, who are getting money. Because if in our countries we do have policies that oblige those companies to pay so amount, I don't see them going against the law. That is the first thing. Ayanda was raising the issue of the competition when you see ShopRite.
Yes.
You have to know that about 80% of our goods are imported. So competition, I don't see where it sits. But again, if there's competition, here is another question. Do each country have what we call a competition policy in place? If it's in place, how far is it implemented to making sure that private companies that are coming in the country, they don't hurt those who are struggling to get to a certain level? So again, I believe that we need investment. We need more South African company through Africa. The issue, it's about our government.
But here's the thing that I hear Barry saying. He's saying that surely there should be some level of ethical practice. Do you think it is appropriate to exploit people to make them earn a salary that is far below?
It's very clear.
Of course, I agree with you that the government might not be implementing the laws or following up on the laws or inspecting that the laws are implemented by these companies. But there's an issue of ethical business practice, and of course, I hear you raising that. But let me hear you on that.
Look, can you give me the name of a foreign company working in South Africa who underpay employees? I don't know of. Do you know why? Because all structures of the government that are called to do the control, they're doing their work. They're making sure that they go there and they control to make sure that people are paid at least this such amount. Back home, it's not the case. I'm telling you, those BITs that are called BITs are not BITs. Those bilateral treaties are between companies or between South Africa in this case and individuals. At the point that you got some treaties, when you go, you read the agreement, it just makes you sick because most of the clauses in those agreements are out of the line.
Okay, we've spoken about that competition in that sense, but is there competition? Is there even competition with the local business? You know, ShopRite is there. What supermarket was existing before? Where is it now? Is it successfully competing? And what does that mean?
This is the question that one will ask.
Yes.
Take the case of the DRC. We had no supermarket before ShopRite arrives. We had Assone Frere, when we were still young, but they're all gone. But the issue is, if you do better, how do I approach you and say, how do we work in partnership? This way, Africans are failing.
But if I get to your space and I see that you're suffering, why am I not wanting to work with you? Because this is your space, is it not? Again, the issue of ethical practice, it does not have to be in law, but it's just common practice. It should be common sense or common business practice if you want to thrive without exploiting or causing much anger amongst the people that are here, one would think. But let me hear Barry and then we'll, yes. Okay,
I'll say a few things, and I think coming to the question of African Renaissance, South Africa, Nigeria, South Africa has pushed these strongly, and if you, the listing subliminary is about the economic renaissance for Africans, and you have better infrastructure. The issue of business and politics with morality should be able to be the underlying philosophy. And if that be the case, ethically, when you go to your brother's compound and his roof is leaking, and you have what it takes as African to help him patch that roof, nothing stops you. But there is one point I want to just add because of time is, it is not true that those of us from Nigeria, Congo, Zimbabwe, Malawi have nothing to contribute to this country. The point is that the government, our government, need to discipline itself to find out what do those of us who are here have to contribute to this country.
I've got to go to Tendai. Tendai, we don't have much time.
Okay, with me, I just wanted to say, okay, why can't the South African government look like, it's just a suggestion to say, okay, for those people who were given like ZEP permits or ZSP permits, why can't they look where the people who are dominate from that area, like I know Zimbabweans, they dominate in the hotel catering industry. Why can't they also go and open hotels in Zimbabwe so that also, you know, South Africans can also go to Zimbabwe and just like that?
Tendai, you know, you've actually touched on what I wanted to say. It would seem as if the foreign national also follow their money. If there's a South African company that is there and exploiting their people and taking their money back to South Africa, those people are likely to follow their money. But hey, you know, we've come to the end of our show, you guys, and I've got to thank you for being here, for the interesting conversations. But what I wanted to summarize and just highlight is the education, the political commitment, the enforcing of laws. And of course, when we talk about education, we talk about teaching the civil society and also formal education. Labor unions, pay attention. You are most needed at this critical time. But remember, we've come to the end of our show, and if you're at home having any challenges, visit the Department of Labor centers near you or join a union. And we believe at Workers' World that a working class united will never be defeated. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Everywhere, insurrection is the order of the day. There's a lot of people crying out for change nowadays. Nobody blame it on the black working class, Mr. Racist. Blame it on the ruling class. Blame it on your capitalist boss.